Change is the new constant. We used to experience disruptions followed by periods of stability, but now the change is increasingly perpetual, pervasive, and exponential. Leading during a time of transition has become the norm as technology, globalization, and new competition disrupt established business models. So, how leaders around the world are leading through a time of transition? This is your host, Swami Sri Perambador, and you're listening to Leadership in Crisis. And we have invited two very, very special guests and my good friends, Mark Johnson and Whynde Kuehn. Let me just give a brief introduction about both of them. Mark is a Southwest Ohio Regional Vice President and Strategic Data Management and Analytics Executive Leader at Fusion Alliance. Mr. Johnson's distinguished career spans more than 40 years in the IT industry, with a deep concentration in data management and analytics over the most recent 24 years. At Fusion Alliance, Mr. Johnson is responsible leading Fusion's engagement with major clients to accelerate data-driven digital transformation. In addition, Mr. Johnson serves as editorial board chair for the Chief Data Officer magazine CDO Magazine.tech, and also as a co-chair MIT CDO IQ Symposium program. Now coming back to Whynde Kuehn, she is the founder and managing director of S2E Transformation, helping organizations bridge the gap between strategy and execution. She has extensive experience in enterprise transformation and planning, and she is also a passionate advocate for using business architecture to enable effective strategy, execution, and digital transformation. Whynde is a long-time business architecture practitioner, educator, author, recognized global thought leader, and community builder with extensive experience applying the discipline at leading Fortune 500 and global enterprises, governmental and nonprofit organizations, and a range of entrepreneurs, social enterprises, and cross-sector initiatives. She is the founder of Wish Architect Art Mastery, a dedicated online platform and community that helps professionals master the art and science of business architecture. She's also a fellow with the Institute for Digital Transformation, co-founder at Business Architecture Associates, senior consultant for Qatar Consortium, and co-founder, vice president, and academic chair of the Business Architecture Guild. Whynde is the author of the book Strategy to Reality, being published in 2022. Soon we'll be telling you when it is going to be publishing. Mark and Whynde, welcome to Leadership in Crisis.
Thank you so much, Swami, for having us today.
It is a pleasure and honor, and really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you.
Yes.
No, I really appreciate for both of you taking time with your busy schedule. I know, Whynde, you just traveled from Europe to US and giving your valuable time to me and my global listeners spread across the multiple industries. So just want to start with you, Mark. What do you think are some of the greatest forces that leaders need to focus on and lead their organizations and teams through during this time of transition?
Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced digital transformation to the top of every organizational agenda as really the number one survival strategy. Whether you're the YMCA or a regional restaurant chain, an energy company, a bank, a retail organization, or an automobile manufacturer, survival today necessitates rapid creation and successful execution of strategies to digitally transform. And we've seen, the last 2 years really sort of color the world by COVID. And I think we've all been looking forward to coming out of the COVID pandemic into some sense of a new normal, but a bit of a return at some level to the way things used to be. But now we're faced with another unprecedented event, the destabilization of the global, economic and collaboration platform, with this war going on in Ukraine right now. So there really is a lot of change that leaders have to figure out how to navigate through and lead their teams through and really, work on from an agile perspective on their strategy. On top of that, harnessing the power of data and technology to deliver new value. So really what I would consider the strategic use of technology, really reinventing the business model to drive safer and more convenient ways for collaboration and for commerce and business and trade to take shape, to see the expression of things like electric vehicles, becoming mainstream, as well as sort of increasing operational effectiveness, efficiency, and agility, just opens the door to an onslaught of change for the human factor within organizational leadership. And that's really why we're excited to have this conversation today. Whynde, what would you add to that?
Yeah, well, I agree. The watchword here is change, most definitely the volume and pace of change that organizations need to deal with. I also think that creating seamless experiences for customers, employees, and partners is critical. And organizations having the ability to work together to deliver value in new ways across their organizational boundaries. And I think in terms of how organizations operate, it's effectiveness, most certainly, but also new demands for transparency and operating in ethical and sustainable ways as well.
The other word, there's one other word I would throw into this opening, and that's the word disruption. And so many industries are being disrupted. How do you manage through and lead strategically through periods of, recursive, repetitive disruption is really important. So I'll just throw that in there as well.
And identify opportunities to leverage it.
Yep.
That's true. I mean, disruption is almost become like a Bible, because if you think about it, people completely forgot about the word taxi. Nobody calls taxi. They just call Uber, even though there are many different companies. They say, hey, are you going via Uber? It could be a Lyft, it could be Ola, it could be anything in either company, but Uber has become almost a new norm for the replacing the taxi. And as you both rightly said, we are all thinking how best we can be ready ourselves as a leader. And we are going through this pandemic, and we thought, okay, we are having a little bit sigh of relief and things are started moving and everything is feeling very comfortable. Suddenly we are hearing about the war and so much again, unexpected things coming. So as you, Mark, rightly said, change is overnight and people have to really do. And as Whynde, you said, it has to be experienced seamlessly to all the stakeholders. So it is really very important, and I appreciate for that. But adding on to that, what are the greatest challenges that you see leaders face as they lead organizations through digital transformation?
Well, that's a good question. And, I thought I had a pretty good handle on the answer. Whynde and I've talked about this quite a bit. But just overnight, the war in Ukraine has really shifted the stage once again, and forced us to go back and think about it. Now, something I found that's really interesting, if you look at what's happening in the theater over in Europe, even though all this bombing is going on, we see data and insights pouring out, from the front lines.
Yes.
We see Facebook and Twitter and YouTube videos, all this social content that's coming out. And it's not just streaming out to give us information about what's going on there. It's also streaming into a lot of AI and ML algorithms to better understand, the impacts of war on a population, and how do you help a population survive. So, I think data, AI, and talent really are core to the success when it comes to strategy in leveraging data and analytics to drive insight. And really, the most important ingredient there is people. In the emerging world order, these elements are driving fundamental changes to the architecture of business. And I think Whynde has just done so much work in this area of linking change and innovation and strategy to the fundamental architecture of how a business is put together and executes efficiently, navigating this sort of torrential downpour, if you will, of change that's coming. So in this world of data-fueled insights that enable intelligent automation, the competencies around how people adopt methods and techniques to really take a strategic plan that may have to pivot quickly are really, really important. Whynde?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Organizations need the ability to do change well, right? And it's one thing to have a brilliant strategy and changes that need to be made, but it's another idea to get it into action as quickly as it needs to happen, as effectively as it needs to happen. You can have the smartest strategy or business model, but if you can't actually get it to market when you need to, it kind of doesn't matter. And we see organizations worldwide of every size and sector quite challenged by this idea to action.
I know. I think you nailed it, Whynde, in terms of action. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? What sort of strategy execution challenges you see in the organization, and why do you think they occur? Because the action is important, but how do you act on it, and what are the challenges to act on it?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, statistics abound, right? It's there's so many. 2/3 of HR and IT organizations develop plans that don't align with the organization's strategies, or 95% of most organizations' employees are unaware or unable to execute upon a strategy, right? Or unclear on what it is. It's like we have it's like sort of we're walking with this little rock in our shoe, and we've become so used to bad strategy execution that we kind of don't even know it's there. And I think part of why this happens is there's a big gap between strategy and big ideas, which are sometimes articulated at a high level, sometimes vague, I might argue, and then taking the actions to make them real. And even navigating organization structure across different leaders. Oftentimes the response to that are developed in siloed initiatives. And so we see things like building the same solution multiple different times, or creating fragmented experiences. And of course, the more we build, the more we have to change again later, which makes us slower to change, and reduces our time to market. So I think the root cause is that most organizations don't treat strategy execution as a core capability or as an important function like they would with sales or marketing or product development or innovation or things like that. And what it really requires is, this strategy execution muscle to be built, where teams are able to work together from end to end to get idea to action. And you have an accountability across all of that, and visibility and traceability, so that if a strategy changes, which we know they do, as Mark has laid a very good foundation for, that you can quickly, pivot. And so underlying this, I'll share a couple thoughts, and Mark would love to hear yours as well. I think the root of these issues is actually a little bit of the human condition. I think we maybe work in silos. Maybe that's a little bit natural, or maybe we're not taught systems thinking as we're growing up. But in higher education, we see some gaps in strategy execution in the business curriculum. In fact, the MBA Roundtable and Business Architecture Guild just released some research that indicates strategy execution is not taught comprehensively enough or specific enough. So it's not necessarily equipping the leaders of today with specific approaches and methods to do that. The other thing is a lacking business architecture, a formalized business architecture in an organization, which is a blueprint of what an organization does at a very high level, just like you'd have for your house. And, just as you probably wouldn't build your dream house without a blueprint, or add an addition without consulting that blueprint, right, or a structural engineer, organizations do the equivalent of that with strategies and transformation. So the architecture gives them, here's where we are, here's where we're going tomorrow, and here's how we're going to get there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that metaphor, because it's so true. And the compression of time out of the opportunity window to execute strategy, given the age we live in today, makes it all that much more important to have that blueprint and to understand that blueprint as a reference point, so that as you begin to introduce change across the lanes of the organization to adopt a new strategy, people have a context for what portions are changing and what portions are not changing. I think that's really powerful. The other thing, Whynde, that occurs to me, based on what you were sharing, is this sort of whole idea, we were talking about this, of the human factor in the success equation of the organization. And Swami maybe didn't mention this in the introduction, but sort of my passion on the other side of me professionally is life transformation through goal achievement. Now, so I teach I teach individuals how to set and achieve goals, which really is an important skill set for the organization, for the individuals within the organization. So once a new strategy has been shaped, and if we're going to execute and get across that finish line, then everyone who is in that synchronized swim really needs to be clear about the objective, the goal, and the date on the calendar by which that goal needs to be accomplished. And then they've got to change the way they think internally in order to rally the resources on their component parts of that organizational team or system, right, to execute in lockstep to deliver that successful transformation. And that skill set is sorely missing. It's not taught in business schools. It's not taught, it's just not taught in many contexts. So, today we see challenges where we know the customer wants it all and they want it now delivered.
Yep.
At two of my largest accounts in Cincinnati, the Kroger Corporation, very large, multinational grocery store chain, 130 billion in revenue, and Total Quality Logistics, a delivery company in the freight business, have both realized that their businesses have had to change dramatically as a result of the conditions of the economy and the world, and yet both organizations have had record growth through their ability to marshal their leaders to get on board with the new strategic direction quickly and to remove roadblocks and to execute in a synchronized way. TQL, for example, doubled its revenue from 20 to 21. They grew from 4 to 8 billion in revenue.
Wow.
How does an organization execute on a strategy when the market completely flips? They operate in the shipper market and the carrier market, and they broker transportation. They don't run any fleets. But in the beginning, kind of coming into the pandemic, they were in a loose shipper market, a loose carrier market, and a tight shipper market. But when the pandemic hit, the thing completely flipped to a tight carrier market and a loose shipper market. So more shippers looking for carriers than there were carriers available to ship goods. Wow. And Kroger likewise had to pivot from customers coming to the store to purchase groceries to customers shopping online through ClickList and expecting those groceries to be picked up at the curb, or even more importantly, delivered to the home, and even more time compressed, delivered to the home in 4 hours.
Wow.
So how do you flip your business model completely to accommodate that kind of transformation? Really comes down to the agility of your leadership to embrace that new strategy, the tactics and techniques that need to change in their behavior to execute in the bridge to reality. And this is really where you have done so much work to provide tools and insights, Whynde, for these leadership teams to embrace in that context.
It is so awesome to hear, the big conglomerates, the leadership is the critical piece. Like, if they are not really showing their agility in flipping the models overnight and thinking, almost like thinking on the feet, thinking out of the box, so fast, accurately, and execute. Because not only thinking, but you need to have a plan, you need to have architecture, and you need to execute. So, and again, Mark, you are always a data-driven guy. That's why I always like you to listen your, the numbers. So in that, how does this effective strategy execution become so critical for organizations today? And what are the other business cases you can share to give more realistic examples? And thanks for those, examples what you gave previously about the Kroger and the TCQ.
Yeah, I think when I think about what we do as a company, what we do at Fusion, what our goal and objective is at Chief Data Officer Magazine, it's to inform and enlighten the C-suite, right in the crosshairs of what Whynde's so passionate about, which is not just crafting your strategy, but figuring out how to bridge it to your reality. And one of the companies that I think is doing a fantastic job out there in the world, it's not my client, but it's Ford Motor Company. Now, Ford has gone very clear. They've gotten very clear that they're all in on electric vehicles, and they've invested, they plan to invest over $20 billion in transformation, but already they've invested $11 billion in building the infrastructure producing plants that power their ability to build electric vehicles. And, they expect 40 to 50% of their global vehicle volume to be electric vehicles by the year 2030.
Wow.
That's 8 years from now. Okay, that is massive, massive transformation required, right? And when you think about an electric vehicle is all about being a connected vehicle. It's all about being a data center with petabytes of data coming off of one vehicle, all the sensors that are required, all of the remote connectivity that is in that vehicle. So not only is Ford changing the nature, the power structure, and the configuration of their fleet, at the same time, they're transforming their business to a complete dependence on digital and data-driven insights to engage their customers who can even buy those electric vehicles from their cell phone, have them configured and delivered and show up on the truck. These transformations are massive, and they won't be, that's a big bet when you say it's a big bet. So really getting clear about how the team has to think, execute, and operate differently in order to land that double axle. When it's time for that, shareholder experience to be realized on the other side of this big bet is really key. I think that data and analytics now have introduced this, the real center stage sort of encroachment into the C-suite of the chief data and analytics officer, who really now has a very important seat at the table and voice to overall strategy execution. And this is kind of where I'm oriented to figure out how do we inform the contextual players at the C-suite of the changes in their thinking to embrace the leadership and wisdom and insight of this new player in the C-suite. Never been there before.
Yep, that's true. That's true. So, Whynde, your comments, anything on that?
I just think back to the point we were saying, Mark, you were sharing about, right, and Swami, flipping the model, right? I think there's a compelling reason why organizations, just people in them, obviously need to switch to a very componentized way of thinking, of almost sort of thinking about the Lego blocks that we perform as a business, the capabilities we perform that can be configured, reconfigured, exchanged with other players in the ecosystem. Mark, I think about what you are outlining there with Ford, and that's a whole ecosystem of companies that have to be able to interact and talk and exchange, let alone the data behind it. So I think that's another big driver as well here.
I know. I'm glad you spoke about Ford, because I'm a very big Ford fan and I have a Mustang. And now my friend is so passionate about the Mustang, and when we want to buy, suddenly we said Mustang is coming in an electric vehicle, which is a Mach-E. Right. It is and rated even higher than Tesla in the recent 2020 Automobile Magazine review. So Ford is really going, and as you said, Whynde, it is not just Ford company going through that transfer, but it is the complete ecosystem, because the entire suppliers, the way how they are coming up and supporting their mission, their transition, it requires a lot of things. So that brings me a new question to you, Whynde. What steps can leaders to take to build this strategy, even in Ford? What are the strategies and what are the steps they have to build this strategy execution to the capacity, what they are thinking, especially, Mark mentioned by 2030, it's 50% of the global vehicles to electric vehicles. It's a phenomenal undertaking, but then how do you do that? So please share your thoughts.
Whynde, before you answer that, let me just add one point of clarification.
Okay.
12/31/2030. That's a specific date on the calendar. And Ford has put it out there. They have said 40 to 50% of our fleet by that date will be EV. And but all of the transformation that's necessary for that to materialize is yet to be figured out, right? They're on the journey. But as Whynde speaks into the things that are going to start to happen, the dominoes that have to start to fall, this is where your question is so powerful. So I'll give it back to you, Whynde.
Indeed. Well, it starts with clear intent. doesn't it?
Yes.
Which, Mark, I know you appreciate. It starts with that vision and intention. Whether it's so what's interesting is, Swami, I appreciate your question. So I'm going to say, how does an organization build this strategy execution muscle? And of course, we're certainly not going to pause all the transformation that we're doing. So we're delivering transformation, and we may be using that as, a use case, as a way to sort of be building our strategy execution muscle as we go. But it does start with leaders, right? Saying we actually need to get good at strategy execution because it's competitive advantage or it's survival, right? I think it's arguably competitive advantage now, arguably survival in the future, just right with the pace of change. So what does that vision really look like in being able to paint that for people, where you can get an idea from end to end? I mean, it's again, it sounds obvious, but our organizations don't do it. They're very fragmented, but we develop strategy. We understand the impacts of those change. We architect those change across people, process, technology. We plan initiatives in a way that they're cohesive, prioritize in the bigger picture. We execute solutions, and we measure success, and hopefully are aligned with what it is we set to. I think some key hallmarks are not just that cohesiveness, but also the accountability and end to end. Not just did I get that thing done on time, but was it really what we said, and was it really the right thing? And so, with the vision in place, organizations can, if there's the political will and backing behind it, they can start re-engineering this across the organization, or it can start in one part of the business that is ready to follow it through end to end. Or oftentimes we'll see people start step by step. They may start with translating a strategy, into initiatives and trying to do it in a little bit different way, or they may focus on the investment portfolio and taking an enterprise view on that. But the real key is to shift from delivering siloed initiatives to building capabilities for the organization, right? That is a really big shift there. And of course, to underpin this, there's one more step, which is to create a business architecture knowledge base, which gives us the golden thread in the way to actually connect strategies to goals, to objectives, to courses of action, to value streams, to capabilities, to the people, process, technology involved, to the initiatives. And as I mentioned earlier, to replan when we need to pivot, because of course that happens.
True. Anything you want to add, Mark, on top of it?
I know that was elegant. And I can't, I don't want to mess with that. I just want people to resonate in it, marinate in that, because she's so correct.
I know. By talking to you guys, I know the time is just flying. But I just want to end with one loaded question to both of you. While we are thinking about the vision, while we are architecting, while you have already given the competence one leader must have to drive the entire organization to the vision to reality, right? The reality is very critical. So what are the competencies and the acumen do leaders need to be able to navigate digital transformation and build their organization's capacity for strategy execution? So can you just give us a closing remarks to this one?
Let me jump in there first, and I'll let you bring us home, Whynde. I'm going to make it really simple. There are 3 really great resources out there that I think individuals need to purchase and consume. 3 books, 2 books, and then an institute that people should check out. The first book is What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Himstetter, PhD. The internal self-conversation for every person who has to lead an organization through the kind of change that we're living through now has to change. So that's a great book to read, published in 1982. And it's been one of my favorites ever since, because I think about what I say when I talk to myself, when I hear strategy, when I hear an ask, what is my conversation? How am I reinforcing the behaviors in myself that need to change to go along with that program? The second one is Managing Transitions by a gentleman by the name of William Bridges. Managing transitions, it's really leading from the way things used to be to the way things are going to be, getting through that fallow middle ground of how we build temporary structures in order to navigate that. So Managing Transitions is a great another resource. And then the Human Change Management Institute. We could talk about change management all day long. But if you just go to the Human Change Management Institute, which is hucmi.com, hucmi.com, there's some great resources out there that help individuals and teams learn how to adopt change. And change starts with the individual. Whynde, I'm going to give it over to you to bring us home.
Awesome. I've already talked about architectural thinking, componentized thinking. That's a big one to develop. Also, an important competency around being able to not just understand technology, but find ways to leverage it strategically, right? It's not just automation. This is now a game changer. So being able to see those opportunities. But again, Mark, just to really riff off what you already said, and the ability to manage and care deeply about the human and the human change. And I'll say it even broader. I think as all of us, no matter what type of organization we're in, including for-profit organizations, we all have to be thinking about the stakeholders. And those are customers, those are employees, those are shareholders, those are the environment, those are all of us, because the transformations that we do are not only impacting the people in the companies, that we work with, but they are shaping the very societies and world that we and future generations will live in. So always just that 360-degree view of stakeholders and deep consideration for our impacts and transformations to them.
Wow, I wonderfully enjoy your conversation so fully, the 360 degrees view. And Mark, so thank you for giving the references. We are talking about all these things, but I like the first one, what you said, change yourself, talk to yourself and see, that is very important. But before we end, I know your book is coming, Strategy to Reality, in 2022, Whynde. So congratulations to you for making that happen. So anything you want to give a little bit about when it is going to happen, any gist you want to share, and then we can end the call.
You bet. And thank you so much. And thank you so much for your support on it. I'm really excited. It's a bit of a life's work for me. So I'm just so excited to share it with people. The book, as you said, is called Strategy to Reality. It's available for pre-order now on just about any site. It will launch in softcover on September 2022. The ebook will be launched before that. And in a few days, there'll be a website called strategyintoreality.com where you can learn more.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And Mark, I know you have been an accomplished leader and a coach and my mentor, and always looking young and dynamic with the charismatic smile on your face. So any closing thoughts?
Well, I would just say that most organizations, the one I'm a leader in included, and I've been the CEO twice in 2 other organizations, today really have to be focused on survival. And that means transformation, transform or die. And, we can just look back to the steamship, industry back in the late 1800s, coming into the early 1900s for international travel. They didn't realize the business they were in or the need to adopt new technologies, and the airline industry put them out of business. And they didn't become airline carriers. They died. So, if we're not able to change, if we're not able to come up with a new strategy and figure out the tools and techniques necessary to execute that to the finish line, the organization is really in peril today. And no more so now than ever before in history. So I think the time is now. And Whynde, I applaud you for getting this knowledge out in the book, and I'm looking forward to consuming it in its entirety.
Yeah, awesome. The time is now, because we all know when we were growing up, blockbuster videos, they're gone. Now it is all Netflix. Even if we say what is all about when we talk to the kids. So the time is now. Change is constant. And as a leader, we need to be on that rhythmic approach of building this architecture and thinking 360-degree view. So nice of you both for joining on this podcast and giving enormous wealth of knowledge, sharing with your experiences. And Mark is always loving with giving the data inputs, and Whynde, you are giving a beautiful information in a step-by-step architecture view. So thank you, both of you, for joining and enlightening in this journey of digital transformation to all the leaders across the globe. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
So much.